Hello, this is Greg Deckler, and welcome to Microsoft Hates Greg. All right, in today's video, the inspiration for this, I was actually listening to the Analytical Mind podcast with Sam McKay and Brian Julius, and it was a very interesting discussion. Actually, they were talking about Chat GPT that I've also been playing around with in terms of writing DAX code and M code and things like that. It's kind of interesting in terms of some of the results you get back. I did a few times that I would ask it something and it would return me a mix of it's like half M code and half DAX code, but I'm sure it'll get better. And I really think it's going to be uh, some really cool technology as it matures. But the other thing they were talking about were the new DAX functions that were getting released. And Brian had an interesting take on this. You know, he mentioned that, the best functions that came out are the ones that got kind of the least fanfare. Evaluate and log got a lot of love. And I even did a video on it and showed how to integrate SQL Profiler into as an external tool in DAX, which it makes it much easier to be able to function that way. But and index and offset and window have gotten a lot of love from people other than me. But Brian's take on it was like the two JSON and the two CSV in particular were the two least fanfare functions, but are actually the coolest and the most useful. And I was thinking about it because I dismissed those when I saw them. Like, well, what am I supposed to do with this? When I saw them and experiment with them initially. So I decided to take a different look, and I gotta say that Brian is dead on about these two functions, particularly two CSV, I think. And Brian has some really cool LinkedIn posts where he demonstrates how you can have a measure that does a 2 CSV on a table and that sort of stuff, and then you can use R visuals to visualize that as a table for debugging purposes, really, really easily. It's really cool. I highly recommend you check that stuff out. But I got to thinking about it, and after listening to Brian and thinking about it some more, I was like, well, it is really cool because now, yeah, I've long been an advocate because I use a lot of VARs, calculated tables that I use as VARs in my measures and that sort of thing. I was like, well, I have been an advocate for a long time of I wish measures could return non-scalar values, like they could hold a table. And then I could just reference that measure, in a VAR, VAR underscore table equals in that measure, and I just have that calculate table. And I wouldn't have to include, the repeated code for how that table is calculated over and over again within, a bunch of different measures. I could just do it once, and then I could just reference it whenever I needed it. So I got to thinking about it. I was like, well, so does this give us that capability? And can we do it easily? And then like, well, why didn't Microsoft include a from CSV function? I mean, they gave us two CSV. You think the corollary would be give us a from CSV where we can just basically have one function that says from CSV, feed it the measure, and it returns a table, right? Wouldn't that be great? Um, be exactly what I would want. Be very, very simple. And they would still preserve that measures, only return scalar values, but we'd have a simple way of converting that scalar value back into a table when we needed it. So that's kind of the thought process that I went down. And so I decided, since Microsoft is not, didn't give us a from CSV for whatever reason, you think that would be a no-brainer. I would go ahead and see if I can create the DAX for it. So this on the screen here, I have my beloved table pickle, banana, orange, kiwi, lime, pickle, right? Just it's real simple. And then I created a measure 2 CSV, which does a 2 CSV table, and then I turned off headers, and I'll get to that in a minute as to why. But then that gives us back something like this. That we can display in a table visualization. It actually, formats correctly because it does a control line feed, and that's Unicar 10, Unicar 13 to do that. And Brian's posts on using R visuals to do that with debugging. This makes this look even prettier and more easy to understand and visualize what's going on inside your DAX functions. All very cool, but that's not what I was going for. So I wanted to see if I could take this scalar value, this string that's returned, And again, it's pickle, comma, 10, control, carriage return, line feed, banana, comma, 100, carriage return, line feed, right? I can convert this back to a table relatively easily. And you'll have to be the judge of relatively easily. But my first attempt at this is this from CSV to calculate a table that I created. And what's going on here, right, is all right, I get my number of rows and I do my kind of my normal where I basically substitute out, unicard 10 because that's the carriage return with blank. And then so I get the length of the measure. I subtract out the length of the measure minus the unicard 10s that are in there. And then I do a +1, and that gives me the number of rows that I have, right? Because the last row doesn't have a unicard 10, right? There's no carriage return for the final row of the table. Then I can substitute. What I do is I turn it into a path by substituting, unicard 13, which is the line feed character with blank, and then I substitute unicard 10 with a pipe character. I could have done the reverse, whatever. But that gives me a path, right? My text path. And then all I have to do is, create a table. I add my columns, generate my series, 1 to the number of rows. I can grab my column by, using the substitute again of the path item. So in this case, this row variable within column 1, what it's doing is it's substituting the commas with pipes. So it turns each row into a path. And then I can just grab the path item of row 1. Conversely, for value 1, my second column, I do the same thing, but I grab path item 2 from that. So, and this isn't a terrible solution. And I'll show you in a minute. I tried like the Dickens, I tell you, to get it so that was, all automated in terms of you didn't have to specify the column name. You could just grab it right from the table. But DAX is very adamant about not having dynamic column names, as I found out. Yeah, anyway. But what that gives you is if I go here and go to from CSV, you can see there's the code, and here I have, I've recreated my table, and bonus, I have an index with it. Now I could get rid of the index and recreate the table exactly. All I would have to do is do a select columns. So, all right, so then I tried a second operation. Same starting measure. I just called it CSV 2 CSV1. And then here, it's kind of the similar, but I think it's a little bit better in terms of cleaner code. So I do the same exact thing for the num rows and the text, but for the rows, I do a generate, and then I do my generate series. I can put in my code for that row where I'm substituting up the commas with pipe characters. I can put that in once as a var, and then I can pick out, path item, 1 and path item 2 as my values, and then return a row, column 1, and then val 1 and value 1, val 2. And then so that's a different way of accomplishing what we just did before without add columns, and instead we're using generate and row. So I think that's a little cleaner way of doing it. And again, it returns the same exact values that I want. And then here's the failed attempt, if you will, of trying to get it to be completely automated. And I've tried many different variations of this, where basically I'm just trying to get the columns to be dynamic, if you will. But try as I might, I cannot do that. Anytime I use add columns, I can't. It's so strange because it's so weird because you can use for add columns, for example, and many other functions and different ways I've tried doing this. You can, if you set a variable to a string, you can use that. You can use that variable as the name of the column. Okay. In add columns, it'll give you the little red squiggly lines as if it doesn't like it, but it'll work. But the minute that you do any kind of operation on that, so like for example, I was trying to grab the value and then ampersand, double quotes, right? Things like that. Anytime you do any operation, even if you do that's in that variable, you do like text and then ampersand and then double quotes, it totally then suddenly add columns doesn't like it. I don't know what the reason for that is. I was trying to also do path item, grab out the path item for the header, if you will, and the column name there, and then trying to return it, and I specify text, and when I grab that path item, still doesn't like it. But if it's just a string, if you just say var, my var name equals double quote name double quote, then it works in add columns and other DAX functions that where you have to specify a column name, like select columns, same behavior, all of that. So I gave it my best try. I've not been able to solve it yet. Maybe somebody else out there, um, you know, knows of a solution for it. But it's not the end of the world, right? If we're creating a measure and using TOCSV, then we should know where our columns are in that measure. Which one's column 1, which one's column 2, which one's column 3, column 4, whatever happens to be. So it's not the end of the world. It'd just be a little nicer if we could just have a from CSV function, man. You guys created the TOCSV function, Microsoft. Just give us a from CSV and allow us to like convert it back to a table when we need to. That would be fantastic. We wouldn't need a bunch of crazy DAX code. Not that this stuff is super complicated, but this might be worse than the cure if you were trying to basically every time you wanted to use one of these dynamic measures that you're using TOCSV to, and you're trying to convert it back to table. I don't know if this it's quite a bit of DAX code and probably takes quite a bit of processing power to do it. I have to run some more tests on it and things like that, and some real world scenarios to see if it's actually useful or not. But can you do it? That my channel is all about can you do it, not necessarily should you be doing it. Because can you do it's more fun. So that's all I had for this video. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys next time.